Okay, good evening, everyone. Please, those of us that are here should do well to inform our colleagues the class is about to begin. As usual, there will be no waiting time. Class will start at exactly 5 o'clock. Please let your colleagues know. Thank you. Okay, it's exactly 5 p.m. and we are going to commence. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. In today's class, we'll be looking at advocacy and policy influencing. Advocacy and policy influencing. And this class will be anchored by Mr. Busayo Morakinyo, BOM. Now, Mr. Busayo Morakinyo, I'm going to read a brief biography about him now. Mr. Busayo Morakinyo is an innovative development, governance, and social accountability professional with ingrained experience spanning almost a decade, working with various communities across Africa. he grew and scaled the largest social accountability movement in Africa, Follow the Money, from Nigeria and Gambia to Cameroon, Kenya, South Sudan, Zimbabwe, Liberia, Malawi, Cape Verde, and Ghana, establishing and maintaining effective relationships with partners across policymakers, community-based groups, governments, media, and the civil society that advances the development and socio-economic progress of these communities. He is a disruptive thinker and a strategic manager of people whose cutting-edge ideas on civic and government technology is changing how social innovators view sustainability within the civic and government ecosystem. Along with being a two-time TEDx speaker, he has extensive practical experience in the areas of advocacy, campaigns, grassroots mobilization, citizen engagement, capacity building, civic technology, and research. That is just a brief background on our facilitator for today. And without further ado, join me as I welcome Mr. Busayo Morakinyo. You're welcome, sir. Good evening.
Hi, guys. Good evening. Please, can you confirm if you can hear me? Thank you. Thank you so much, Jessica. Please confirm if you can hear me, please.
We can hear you, sir.
All right, great. Thanks, guys, for having me once again. It's always a pleasure being back every season in the life cycle of the Electoral College. Please, you'd permit me. I have a bit of a cold, so my voice would may not be as loud as it used to. But if at any point in this conversation you do not get to hear me, please just probably leave a chat so that I would be able to pick it up and probably, look for other ways to communicate. So thanks a great deal, my friends from the Electoral College. Just also permit me, I may not be able to turn on my video because I'm not so sure I look too great. Jessica, I hope that's fine. I'm going to I may not be able to turn on my video. Is that fine?
That's okay, sir. That's
All
okay.
right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys. The Electoral College is very the work that is done at the Electoral College is very important, and I do not take it for granted, and that's why I always come back every other time to share a bit of my thoughts with the good people who have attended so many classes. Without wasting time, my emphasis would be around effective advocacy and policy influence. And to be able to understand how this goes and the benefits, I would share a whole lot of scenarios. I would share probably a whole lot of experiences, more practical experiences that I have doing doing the job of an advocate and influencing government policies and those people in public offices to get solutions like we normally would want to get. Please, can you confirm if you can see my screen?
We can see it, sir.
All right, thank you so much. You're far too kind. So let's dive in. Effective advocacy and policy influencing. Okay, so I always want to start from what advocacy is. I'm so sorry. Also, I like to walk the room and get people's opinion. But you just pardon me for today, guys. The first place I always want to start is advocacy. What do we understand by advocacy? Who is an advocate? One of the most used words in the civil society space, the social sector, is the word advocacy. And this is because a bunch of the work we do, we have to do them under that toga or that name of advocacy, in the sense that because we do not have, power, and when I talk about power, I'm talking about either political or economic power or socio-economic power. We have to engage the system from the perspective of being an advocate. Now, and when we engage the system from the perspective of being an advocate, it just falls under the same definition of an advocate, or it falls under the definition of advocacy. But for me, some definitions stands out strongly. I'll just share some of those definitions with you. Then we'll take it up from there. An advocate or advocacy is when, we challenge those in authority to make decisions and change policies, programs, and plans in such a way that they are fair, equitable, and favor the disadvantaged and powerless people in the community. Now, you are free to call yourself an advocate when what you're doing is challenging, and I use these words very deliberately, so please work with me on this. When you're challenging those in authority, to make decisions, right? What it means is, for example, I need to speak to my local government chairman. I need to speak to my constituency leader. I need to speak to my House of Representative member. The reason why I'm speaking to them, is challenging them to make decisions. Um, it could also be challenging them to change policies or programs and plans in such a way that they are fair and equitable. So whenever we see policies that do not make sense, that are not fair enough, that we feel are morally not great, our jobs as an advocate, is to speak to those issues, and to rejig, the system in such a way that we are defending those who are disadvantaged and powerless. So most times, your advocacy is not even about you. Your advocacy may be about a community. It may be about, something of interest, to you, and it can cut across various things. Now, anywhere you see a policy, be it a government policy, be it an organizational policy, the moment you see the need to challenge those in authority to make right decisions or better decisions or change their policies, no, you wear the hat of an advocate. Let's look at this other definition. Advocacy is when you speak up or draw the attention of communities about an issue or problem that affects the community. Advocacy is when you speak up for, when you support, right? When you support a cause for a community. So for example, we have communities that probably have been experiencing government neglect, for a long time. And I mean, when I talk about government neglect, I mean, it's everywhere. It's everywhere across the country. When we talk about government neglect, we're talking about everything that government, quote and unquote, does that really doesn't make so much sense. A typical example is a time when we went into a community and we discovered that the last time anybody from any government agency came to that community was probably 3 years ago before the elections. And I think this was post 2015 election, and we're engaging with them and said the last time any government official, came to their community was the last time there was an election. Now, and the community was left handicapped in the sense that the community didn't have basic amenities. They didn't have anything. What we did was we started speaking for the community, bringing their situations to limelight and bringing it to the front burner, for people to pay attention to what's happening there, and support the change we wanted to see at that level. So those of us who are listening to me, can you type in the chat box what your thoughts on advocacy is? What do you think advocacy is to you? I've given you two definitions. I'm going to give you some more, but I just need you to drop in the chat box what you understand by advocacy, or better still, who do you think is an advocate? Just if you can drop it in your chat. I'm looking at the chat sessions at this moment so that we can be able to have discussions around that. I'm waiting for the first person to share that with me. I'm waiting for the first person to share that. What is your understanding of who an advocate is? What is advocacy to you above what I have said? Whilst I'm waiting for the first person to drop that in, I just want to take another definition, because for me, I like to serve a buffet, for you to be able to connect with any of these definitions that make sense to you. And hopefully I can be able to get a person who recommends a course. That's amazing. Dr. Wala Tobichuku, that's amazing. A person who recommends a course. Yeah. An advocate is also someone who take action so that those in the position of power or responsibility change their negative attitude. I like this one too. Change their negative attitude and behavior about the poor and disadvantaged people, and to start treating them as human beings. This is very, very important, because whether we like it or not, guys, most times, most often than not, when you say you're an advocate, or when we talk about advocacy, you're actually talking about things. Excuse me, guys. You're actually talking about, things, or mostly things that affect other people, not even what really affects you directly, right? So in my line of work and experience, I have had to advocate so much for people I do not even know from Adam, right? Some of the issues I've raised are issues that doesn't even concern me particularly, but because I see the need, to drag those who, are in the positions of responsibility, those people who are paid with taxpayers' money, like I like to say, and because I have to speak on their behalf, I have been in that line of advocacy. I like what I'm seeing on the chat box. An advocate is that person who speaks up for those who cannot speak up for themselves. That is amazing. That's the truth. Or they don't know how to reach the people who will help them. Jeremiah, I think this is amazing. This is perfect. Like I said, this is just pushing my thoughts that most times what we advocate about are things that actually does not concern us. Sometimes there are things we can do without. Sometimes there are things that it doesn't even concern us in the first place. That's brilliant. Oluwatoyosi Michael, advocacy is the act of supporting or promoting a particular cause, idea, or policy. Amazing, amazing. An advocate is someone or group of people that represent others. Amazing. Advocacy is simply advancing a cause for change. I mean, it's not just about advancing a cause. It's advancing a cause for change. So there must be something that you're qualifying. There must be something you're either quantifying, qualifying, or trying to identify and speak up for. Speaking up for what is not right to make it right. Amazing. Advocacy means an act of or process of supporting a cause. That's beautiful. Victor Ahmed says advocacy is standing in the gap for the interest of the populace. Super amazing. Advocacy is promoting and supporting a cause to influence public opinion on decisions. Thank you for that, Mohammed. Curtis, I like how you put it in bold. Advocacy is any action that speaks in favor of, recommends or argues for a cause, support or defense, or pleads on behalf of. That's brilliant. Amazing, amazing definition of advocacy. An advocate is a person who works for a cause. Yeah, that's very true. Someone who passionately believes in a cause. These are brilliant, guys. These are very brilliant. Thank you for supporting me in this class. Even if my energy is not as what it used to be, thank you for supporting me. It means that you have an idea of what we are talking about, which gives me more right to move on in this conversation. Guys, let me just look at this definition also, because it ticks the box for me, guys. Most times, one of the biggest challenges we have as Africans, as advocates, as people who want to understand how things work in terms of politics, in terms of the economy, in terms of the government. One of the things we leave on the table without attending to is what I call strategies. And because of what I do, I realize that strategy is the most important thing you can have, in terms of achieving a position or achieving an aim you set out for. And so advocacy is developing proactive strategies and tactics. Now, this brings in the definition of tactics. It brings in tact as a very integral part of advocacy. Now, anybody can call themselves an advocate, or anybody can get into any advocacy. But the core, how I will be able to sit down here and understand that you know what you're talking about, or you know what you want to do, is when I begin to see those strategies and tact, aimed at building the power, clout, and the energy of a community or of community members so that they're able to claim their rights and entitlements. Guys, remember, this is important. I'm going to come back to this soon. This is very important, by the way. When we started, we spoke about the fact that an advocate is that person who stands in, who supports, who speaks for, who engages on the behalf, who works for a cause, But when you look at this definition you have on your screen now, what this definition is screaming out is that, there's a level to which your advocacy moves from just you speaking for, engaging on behalf of people, to the point where you're using intelligent strategies, which is aimed at building the power, clout, and the energy of the community members so that they're able to claim their right. Now, you have moved from the point where you're just speaking on behalf of these people. You're speaking on their behalf because, they are disadvantaged, they are poor. You've been able to move from that level. You've been able to introduce strategies. You've been able to introduce tactics. You've been able to introduce, activities that have supported them in building their power, so that they can be able to claim their right. You started from speaking for them, but at this level now, you are no longer speaking for them, they are speaking for themselves. We're going to get into this much later, but I want you to pay attention to the change in this definition because it's going to mean so much to you as we move on in this class. The next question I want to ask is when do you think we should advocate? We have some examples, on the slide. Wow, Ambassador Godwin, you just dropped so much. I think this is amazing. Thank you for this. I also need just as a check. I also need people to in the chat box still give me the difference between a policy and a law. The difference between a policy and a law, right? We're going to come back to that. Just drop it if you have an idea. I mean, no wrong answers, just share your thoughts because it's going to help us to understand more. Because the moment we begin to get into policy influencing, it flips a little, right? And so I found out that a whole lot of people have challenges understanding, the difference between a policy and a law. But let's check if we have that issue, in this class. So give me what is the difference between a policy and the law? Whilst you're working on that, I would speak to the slide you have on your screen, when to advocate. If we agree that advocacy is we speaking on behalf of people, if we agree that advocacy is building the tact, the intelligence, the emotional capacity, the physical capacity, building the cloud of communities to be able to engage for themselves, then when is the right time? When do we where do we get to and we say, no, this is the right time to begin to advocate? The first one is when there are problems that affect disadvantaged communities. Guys, communities are everywhere. This class is a community. So, for example, I've been seeing a whole lot of you have pseudo parties, on the group. I've been seeing the APC, the PDP, APGA, NNPP, and the likes of those. And I think it's beautiful what Electoral College always does to give you a real-time scenario. So let's still put it within this class. And let's say that we probably have, I don't know if there's a president of the class, Jessica. Do we have who's a president or a deputy president or something? Do we have?
Okay, each party has chairpersons and vice.
Okay, each party and there are people who are members of those parties. Yeah. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
Okay, let's use the APC because it's more practical because the government in power is an APC government. So sorry to the APC pseudo party members and the chairperson in advance because stray bullets may hit you guys because we have to do a practical session, right? The APC is the government in power at the federal level today in Nigeria, right? And now you have members of the community, and those of you who are in the APC political party, pseudo party, a good time when you begin to, or when members of other party, I see the NNPP, I see the Labour Party, begin to speak out, when, they notice that there are elements of depravity within what the ruling party is doing. When members of each political party or members of a political party begins to see that there are problems here, and so maybe that problem is the chairperson is not listening to us. Our chairperson is autocratic. Our chairperson is nepotistic. Our chairperson, doesn't understand that security of lives and property is one of the critical essence of government. When we notice that our chairperson is probably embezzling our money, which other things is the APC doing today in Nigeria? When we realize that the chairperson is a propagandist, who would always point fingers to PDP, and point fingers to Labour Party, or point fingers to any other person, without taking responsibilities for their action. Guys, when there are problems that affect disadvantaged communities, it is a good time to advocate. Now, the members of the NNPP wants to do a political rally, to become the strongest party, in the electoral college. And the members of the APC, or the chairperson of the APC, is ensuring that there's no slots to do that. Right now, the NNPP wants to increase, its grounds to be able to tackle what the APC is doing. But there's that chairperson who just wants to do what he wants to do. Now, the best time to advocate, for the NNPP at that is when NNPP realizes that there's a blockage in its programs, in its expansion programs, right? Another time to advocate is when you understand the root causes of the problem. Guys, remember I spoke about tactics and strategies, right? And advocacy is not just punching aimlessly to the air. That's not what advocacy is, guys. That's not what advocacy is. Advocacy is not just punching into the air. Advocacy is a scientific process, that includes strategies and tactics. And part of those strategies is you understanding the root cause of the problem. The root cause of this APC's dominance, for example, could be the fact that more people didn't vote in the last election. It could be the fact that, INEC didn't, perform optimally. It may be the fact that, the APC didn't come out for political, for interview sessions. Right. So we didn't even understand what the APC was going to come and do in the first place. Right. So whatever the reasons, the moment you understand the root cause of the problem, it's a good time, to advocate. When there are policy implementation gaps, and I've seen, thank you so much, guys. I can see a whole lot around policy here. Someone says, for me, a policy is what the government intend to do, do it, not to do, while a law is a principle that guides our everyday activity. That's brilliant. The objective of law is to bring justice to all. On the other hand, policies framed for the achievement of certain aims. Cleto says law means to make the set of standards to govern the people and their behavior. What policy means protocols or procedures, to implement that law. That's also brilliant. And the objective of law is to bring justice to all. On the other hand, policy is framed for an achievement of certain aims. Okay, great. For me, Oluwatoyosi says laws focus on individual rights, while rights and justice, while policies focus on achieving specific goals or outcomes. That's brilliant. Laws are often reactive, while policies are proactive. That's great. I like that dimension for you. A policy is a set of guidelines or principles that direct decision making and actions within an organization or government. It's not legally binding. This was what I was looking for. The difference between one of the major differences between a policy, what a policy is, and a law is the fact that policies are not legally binding. They are not legally binding. What does this mean? It means that if the APC government comes out today and says, we're going to give students student loans, right? If that happens, and after 1 year, tomorrow or next tomorrow is going to probably make it 1 year, of the APC government. If after 1 year, we do not see the student loans, we do not have a right to go before a court of competent jurisdiction, to ask the APC why students still do not have loans. The reason is because it's a policy, right? But the moment a policy moves above being a blueprint, the moment it becomes gazetted, the moment it goes through the acts of parliament and the president appends a signature on it, it fully becomes a law. Now, and in what we call laws, we must also understand that there are also loopholes, to the effectiveness of those laws. For example, guys, the EFCC recently woke up and says, it was arresting people for spraying the naira. Right. Now, many people didn't understand that there was a law against the abuse of the naira. Some people felt it was just a government policy because every year now, every 3 market days, EFCC will come out and say, do not maintain the naira, CBN will do not mutilate the naira, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't just a policy statement. It's a gazetted process that is embedded in the Constitution. The Constitution gives it power, and so some people will go to jail when they infringe. If it was just a policy that didn't have a legal backing, it's not contestable in the courts. The courts would have thrown it out. So thank you for this definition. Government and its ways of operation are beautiful, but at the same time amazing in Nigeria. Absolutely. A policy and a law serve different purposes and have distinctive characteristics. Why is this giving me Chat GPT vibes? Ambassador, it's giving me Chat GPT vibes, which is brilliant, by the way, because it shows that, we have people who are going to dig deeper into the subject. The policy is a guiding principle or a course of action proposed or implemented by an organization. Policies are typically internal to the organization, or government. A law, on the other hand, is a formal rule established by a legislative body, such as parliament. That explains a bit more of what I'm talking about. Unfortunately, guys, the government is so smart that in its laws that is supposed to hold it accountable, the parts where they are being held accountable are either very weak or lax. So, for example, I always tell everybody, go back to the right to education of the Nigerian child. Go back to the right to education. Now, it is the responsibility of government, to provide for the welfare of its citizens. But unfortunately, you cannot go to court, take the government to court for not providing for your welfare. You can't do that, guys. You can't. You are not even going to win in such a suit, because our system is still a little bit backward. And the moment you understand the root cause of the problem, or the moment you understand, that education is probably a right of the people, it's a good time to advocate. It's a good time to advocate. So guys, when you look at my screen again, these are the points where you can advocate, and many more. When you have to demand for the rights of people, when there are policy implementation gap, the government says we're going to provide student loans. The question is how? How is that going to happen? I remember in the last constitutional review, when every part of the constitutional review that spoke about the rights of women were neglected, I saw a whole lot of women, a whole lot of civil society, folks go for advocacies, protested in front of the National Assembly and all of those places. So those are good times to advocate. This is also very important. It's called the targets of advocacy. Remember, guys, that we said that the advocacy that works, must have some elements. Part of those elements is strategy, So for you to be able to become more strategic as an advocate, you have to understand what we call the targets of advocacy. And targets of advocacy are on 2 levels. The first level is a primary target. Someone will ask me, what is a primary target? The primary target is the person or individual with the power and authority in the decision-making chain to give you the ultimate decision. What this means is, if I am advocating to the chairperson of the APC of the Electoral College, and I want him to give us permission to be able to campaign as an NPP. The primary target is looking at the persons who can make the decision. Sometimes the head of government, when we relate it to government now, the head of government may really not be the primary target, right? And it depends on the kind of issues. If the issues you're talking about is a local government issue, you probably are looking at the local government chairman. But because the local government system has been bastardized in Nigeria, the local government chairman may just be a figurehead, and the person who can take that decision or make that decision could be the state governor, right? In some cases, right? And there are things that the state governor, there are issues where the state governor is probably your primary target. But just put it in your mind that the primary target is that person or individual with the power and authority in the decision-making chain to give you the ultimate decision. The person who can say yes, and that all your work is done. The person who can wake up and say, I support this cause, and I'm making this decision. The person who has that power, whilst your secondary target is a person who is not the ultimate decision maker, but has an influence on the chain of decision making. Let's go back to example. The APC chairperson has again restricted us from running our campaigns to solidify our political structures in NMPP. Right. Now, I now realize that, well, the chairperson, though, has ability to make this decision and give us a free hand to campaign, I discovered that there's someone else who is very influential and who the chairperson cannot say no to, right? And let's say that person is Jessica, right? So as an advocate, what am I going to do? When I discover that this primary target is not targeting well, I would now go to someone who I know has influence over the person who is going to make that decision. And in this case, that person is Jessica. So I'm going to go to Jessica. And this is where tactics and strategy comes in from. I'd say to Jessica, you know that, on this our electoral college, everybody should have a free hand. We want to solidify our party, but you see, the APC people, that's how they behave. And it cuts across how they behave everywhere. Apologies to the chairperson of the APC, but the APC are always wanting to intimidate us. So Jessica, what can you do for us? Now, so guys, remember that our primary target is the chairperson of the APC. But we're now going through the secondary target, who, is not the ultimate decision maker, but has influence on the chain of decisions. So Jessica would pick up her phone and say, Mr. Chairperson of the APC, you have to give NMPP and every other political party a level playing field, right? So because of the authority Jessica has, she is now able to influence the decision of the primary target to open up the space for everybody, to have a level playing field. Note, guys, Jessica is not the primary target at this time. You understand? She's just the secondary target, but she has influence over the primary target. So now, guys, extrapolate this, right, with every other level of advocacy. The primary target could be a local government chairman. And guys, so sorry, I apologize for those of you who are just joining in. The reason why I can't turn on my video, I have a very terrible flu. I'm not feeling too great, and that's why I can't turn on my video, and that's why I sniff from time to time. Sincere apologies. I do not take I'm not taking you guys for granted. I just I'm not there. I'm not 100% today. But I'll give my best still. So the moment you understand who your targets are, it's simple for you to be able to develop the right strategies. Now, let's say that all our efforts to speak with the APC chairperson has proved abortive. but he probably has a wife or a side chick, that has influence, you know, and in my experience, we've done this a whole lot, where the wives of our primary targets, becomes our best influencers, and how did we know this? There's what is called local intelligence that is not taught in the four walls of the classroom. You look at people, you observe them, and you observe people who have authority, who have powers, that they respect, or people who they respect, and you go to those kind of people. Those kind of people will become your secondary target. So in building your advocacy strategies, do not neglect your secondary targets. Your primary target is important because that's the person who's going to run the decision in your favor. Your secondary target is also important because your secondary target sometimes or most times, has that power to influence. It could be the side chick, guys. It could be anybody. It could be the girlfriend of, the APC chairperson. It could be, you see, one of the truth about being an advocate is the fact that you can come up with any tactic so long, guys, so long as it doesn't break the law. I've seen people go on various levels of, let me even tell you guys this funny story. Jessica, are we streaming this? Is this being streamed?
Yes, sir.
Okay, no, I'm not going to tell the story again because it's being streamed.
Yes.
I will just give you sides of we needed to penetrate the community. And it was difficult. The community in the Niger Delta region. It was really difficult because, the youth bodies of some of these communities are really strong. And so we were going into the community. We tried every way to get access. We didn't get access. And one of my guys in that state, that particular state, just told us to give him some time. He was going to work on it. And within 24 to 48 hours, he got back to us and says he has made all the connections in the community. And I got curious. So we've been working on this for weeks. How did you do this? And guys, guess what he told me? He said he didn't take his car. He went by public transport. So he was able to bond in the motor park with the driver, with people in that public transport. And he was able to ask some few questions because he also spoke the language, predominantly pidgin, and so he told the driver to drop him where, there are so many young people because he really didn't know that community, even if he was from that state. And when they dropped him, he said when he saw where some group of boys were gathering, and he said to himself, these guys would be able to help me. And he went there and he bought them. He stayed there for a while. It was like a pub. Those of you who do not understand or know what a pub is, it was like a beer parlor of some sort. This was quite early in the morning, and he said he got part of the local beverage. I will not call the name of the beverage the community takes. And he says when he started enjoying himself through that process, he continued to contribute to the gist, because there's some level of fellowship that happens in the pub. The pub is almost a place where everybody feels like they know everybody, right? And so he started ordering some few more drinks for them. And, within less than an hour or two, he became friendly with the people and was able to identify few people who he could ask questions and ask the place to the way to the king's palace, for him to go and pay his homage and tell them what he wanted to do. And so something that took us so long a time to do, because we were in Abuja, it took him a shorter time because he understood, using native intelligence, as an advocate that he is, to be able to get the result. So long as you can get your result, and so long that it doesn't hamper moral codes or ethics. These two things are very important because one of the hallmark of every advocate is being ethically compliant. I would explain that a bit more soon. let's move into policy influencing. We started speaking about policy. We're saying that there's a difference between policy influence, there's a difference between policies and laws, and whether we like it or not, there's a massive difference. It sometimes looks the same, it sometimes feels the same, but there's a difference. And one of the major differences, policies are not justiciable. I cannot take, the APC chairperson to court, today, over something that is just a policy. I can take him to court based on an existing law, that has gone through the Acts of Parliament and has been gazetted, and it's been agreed on to be a law. In policy influencing, these things are very important. Now, all of these things you see in white are very important. Policy influencing is a deliberate, emphasis on deliberate. Guys, do not forget tact and strategies. So tact and strategies, we're looking at the deliberateness of influencing policy and systemic process of influencing the policies, practices, and the behaviors of different targeted stakeholders. Remember that the last slide before we came to this slide was talking about targets of advocacy. Now, in engaging your targets of advocacy, is you being able to identify different stakeholders who falls under the primary targets or the secondary targets, that are most influential on an issue, involving beneficiaries and increasing their ownership and capacity on the issue. Now, when we started the conversation around advocacy, guys, the conversation was about what you can do or what you should do as an advocate. But the last definition, I shared with us on advocacy, started speaking about the ability to build the power, the clout, of communities to begin to, speak for themselves. And so policy influencing is that deliberate and systemic process of influencing the policies, practices, and behaviors of different targeted stakeholders that are most influential on an issue involving the beneficiaries. So it's not you walking alone, it's you involving those people who are the beneficiaries. Remember, I said that most times what you are advocating for actually doesn't concern you, most often than not. In my almost 1 decade of leading advocacy and policy influencing campaigns, the issues I have advocated for rarely concerns me. There are things I can do without, or there are things that have escaped, and so it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's beautiful when we can go through this process, not just alone, but work it out with the beneficiaries. It's very important because we're increasing their ownership and the capacity on the issue. Now, this is one of the most sustainable models of advocacy, because advocacy, number one, could be expensive. Advocacy, number two, could be draining and exhausting. Advocacy, number three, could take a very long time. Now, for you to avoid what we call burnout or analysis paralysis, you need to begin to look at the strategies that can help your advocacy go for as much as they can. There's been advocacies that has been for over 100 years, right? The Ogoni massacre and the Ogoni issues, the Ogoni cleanup has been for a very long time. It is not yet done. People are still advocating every single day against oil spill, right? Some issues are very long. Some people started it, they have died. Other people have continued, they have died. Some issues are going to be discussed about for the next 50 years in Nigeria, unfortunately, right? And so for you to be able to have that sustained advocacy or consistently influence government policies, you need to be tactful. You need to grow strategies, and it needs to be a deliberate and systematic process. If not, you would experience a burnout. I have been on some advocacies that I beg God never to be on again. In fact, guys, I must be frank with you, there are some advocacies I have quit. In fact, at 2020 October, I vowed never to come out for a protest again in Nigeria because I experienced that burnout. The NSAS, what they call the NSAS massacre, hit me in dimensions I didn't believe it could ever hit me. And I said to myself, never again would I be on the street for any cause in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Would that change tomorrow? I do not know, right? But for me, it was that I had experienced the burnout. In fact, the burnout I experienced took me away from the civil society space, 2 years later, because I had to leave the civil society space in 2022 and started focusing on something totally different. Now, so as an advocate, your mental health is important. And so you must be able to understand that for you to live long and fight another day, you must come up with effective strategies, and it must be systematic. It must be things that you should be able to bequeath to the next generation, even if you do not complete it. So let's look at the handshake between advocacy and policy influencing. The handshake between advocacy and policy influencing, therefore, is the fact that, see, no matter how we view it, advocacy is one of the integral part of our human society, and policy influencing is much more that, in the sense that when I set out on an advocacy, especially around issues that concerns public, concerns, the poor, the disadvantaged, the marginalized, invariably what I am doing in that process is I'm influencing policies cut across government institutions, cut across, the conversations we're having, right? It could be around education. It could be around healthcare. It could be around security. It could be around local government autonomy. It could be around anything I decide to take up as an advocate. I also feel that the tag advocate or advocacy is not meant for a select few. I just spoke to you about mental fatigue and burnout. Advocacy should be about, supporting or helping the people who are most affected by these issues to take up the responsibility to begin to speak about these issues, because they understand the human impact of these issues, we're talking about. So let's look at the principles of policy influencing. And I have this acronym I always use. The acronym is CLASP. CLASP. The C stands for credibility. Why would people trust you? Now, whilst I understand that I say you can use any methodology to be able to achieve your advocacy outcomes, I emphasize that ethics becomes important. You should have a moral code. It's just like when you talk about journalists, that people say journalists have moral codes. As an advocate, you should have a moral code. Unfortunately, the moral code is not written. But one of the things I know so much, that can hamper any advocacy at any level is when the people leading the advocacy begins to lose credibility. The question is, why would people trust you? The Nigerian Labour Congress today, and the TUC, and sometimes ASU, are quite notorious, not because they do not have genuine intentions, but sometimes people fail to see how credible these guys are. The Nigerian Labour Congress over the years, have raised the hope and dashed the hope of so many Nigerians. So when Labour Congress today is going on strike, nobody takes them seriously. I don't know if you take them seriously, but me, I don't take them seriously. The reason is because credibility, has been questioned. During the petroleum subsidy protest of 2012, when the NLC and some people went to Abuja and came back and, they agreed with the government, young people were still on the street. Now, some of those young people were shot. One person lost his life, and everybody moved on. So in 2020, when people said the biggest problem of the NSAS movement was the fact that the NSAS movement didn't have a structure, Some of us would argue from the school of thought that in 2012, when there was a nationwide protest like that and there was a structure, we know people were bought over, right? You now want them to buy people over, in 2020 again, after people have learned from the experience of 2012. Now, so argue both ways, any way you want to come from. The truth of the matter is credibility is important. How credible are you as an advocate who wants to advocate on behalf of other people? It's very important. Number two, legitimacy. Who or what gives you the right to interfere? You must be able to recognize what gives you the right. When we're talking about human rights abuse, what gives you the right to interfere? What gives you the right to interfere in Ogoni, the issues around the South region of Nigeria? What gives you the right, to, and I mean, one of the legitimate rights you have is that you're a citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. If you pay tax, you're a citizen. In fact, you don't need to pay tax to be a citizen. Nigeria is our country. There's nothing they want to do about it. So we're active stakeholders in the project Nigeria, no matter how they feel about it. Now, the A on this acronym stands for accountability. How transparent are you, how accountable are you, especially when you are dealing with local community. You go into a community and you say, I've noticed you people have a problem with water. Let's support you, in asking for the government to supply potable water to you. When you now begin to go on this process, it now becomes a personal, something for personal aggrandizement for you, probably because you now have some, airplay on Channels TV or TVC or any of these radio stations. You now think it's about, advocacy is not about you guys. Advocacy is about the interest of the people you're speaking for. And most often than not, my best go-to strategy is working with these communities. So I go into a community and say, your biggest problem is water. My work is cut out for me in terms of being strategic. I'm beginning to think, how can I make these people understand that the lack of water can actually kill their children? How can I teach them? How can I grow their capacity? How can I build their knowledge base? How can I build their clout? So if TVC is calling me for an interview today, must I go for the interview? Or do I go with a member of the community or two members of the community? Because it shows a certain level of accountability. The place we miss it most times is when we want to become the alpha and omega, because a whole lot of people have become celebrities through advocacy work. I mean, think about it. Some names may fly through your mind. There are some people who made so much money from advocacy. Those of you who are in the civil society, that in fact your salaries are probably paid from the advocacy work that you do, here and there. It's not wrong. What I'm saying in a sense is the fact that as an advocate, you must realize that accountability plays a critical role, in your ability to influence government policies. And that's when you're open, not when we've agreed. You now go behind us and collect money. Even if you didn't collect money from the politicians, the moment the community begins to question your credibility or your accountability, it shows that there's a dent on what you're doing. And the S stands for service. How are you being helpful to the community? Guys, being an advocate is not just about you. Yes, you have a great voice. You have a massive knowledge base on the problem, but it's not about you. Being an advocate is about your ability to carry the community along. See it as a service. See it as a service. One of the pillars of humanitarianism is voluntary service. It's very, very important. Those of you who probably were part of the Red Cross anytime, or either the Boys Brigade or the Girl Scout or the Boy Scout and all of these things, one of the things that is very prominent is service. Service is very, very important. It's you offering yourself almost on a platter to support the plight of marginalized people. Then the last, the P in my abbreviation is power. What is your power base and how do you use it? What is your power base? There are some times when what you're advocating for is bigger than your forefathers. How then do you collaborate? How then do you join forces? Collaboration becomes key. I mean, as an individual, there's little to what I can do, but as a community, there are massive things we can do, right? So as you gain this knowledge, begin to ask yourself, how can we work together as a team to either build an advocacy or to test this knowledge we're getting? Guys, meanwhile, if I spend, we've dived in for 1 hour now. If I've spent this time, with being under the weather with you, and you do not use these things I'm sharing with you, it really doesn't make sense, right? The reason why Electoral College says, we should come and have this engagement with you is because we believe that it's going to make you better. It's going to improve the work that you're already doing, right? So it's very, very important that you practicalize these things. It could be as a cohort. It could be as members of the NNPP. It could be members of the Labour Party. I don't have so much value for APC. APC is carrying me. Sorry, guys. Sorry, but APC is a threat to my life, at this moment. But hey, for those of you in the Electoral College in APC, we love you so much, but that was just on a lighter note. So what is your power base? There's so much I can do as an individual, but we can do more as a community, as a group. It's very, very important. Don't forget that. So let's look at advocacy approaches. If the goal is to win, right? If the goal is to win, we must be able to classify our stakeholders under these various profiles. What you have on top in green is called the low profile. The low profile is quiet negotiations. You can just share information, meet with civil servants, non-public brief, walk into an office. And he says, do you know that we have the highest amount of out-of-school children in Nigeria globally? Gentleman conversations. This is where you're sharing data. This is where you're probably sipping coffee, or taking tea and having conversations, right? Non-public, it's not confrontational. It's quiet, because you're probably passionate about education, right? Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it works. In fact, sometimes the biggest kind of advocacies or policy influencing is the low profile, but your power base must be strong. It could be in terms of knowledge. It could be in terms of personal clout. It could be in terms of influence. If I've used Jessica so much today, if Adams, for example, has a friend who is a local government chairman, your childhood friend becomes a local government chairman tomorrow, the first way you would want to engage with him is by having, quiet negotiations with him. Because you probably have access. You say, chief, Nigerians and how we call people chief and boss. He's your friend, you call him chief. You see, the amount of people out of school in this local government is getting high. What do you think we can do about it? I'm passionate about education, so I can share some strategies with you. Why don't we start, taking kids out of school? Why don't we create pseudo schools, where some children can go to school in the afternoon? We can get, some kind of arrangement for them. So some people go to school in the morning, some people go to school in the afternoon. And you have those negotiations and you show him that probably in our community, 100,000 children are not going to school. This is wrong. And you have that agreement. Sometimes it works. In fact, most times it works. But when low profile is failing, we need to switch it up, right? So we'll go to the medium profile, continue negotiations. You still meet with civil servants. You now begin to go public, in what we call feed the opposition, right? It's a strategy, guys. It's a strategy. It is what it is, unfortunately. We cannot run away from it. You begin to feed the opposition, right? So typical example is, I'm not a member of any political party within the Electoral College, but because APC is the one leading, I now begin to talk to Labour Party and NNPP and PDP. I tell them, do you know that this is a problem? Do you know that the reason why our local government chairman or the APC chairperson is not giving us the ability to increase our power base on this thing. Do you know it's because, he doesn't just want us to thrive. I begin to feed the opposition. Most often than not with data, I'm beginning to say, hey guys, do you know? I can just start a do you know series. Do you know that there are 100,000 out of school children? I can say, do you know that, what we pay the local government chairman in a month can take 50,000 people back to school? Do you know that the SUV, the local government chairman just bought, can take 20 children to school, and all of those stuff? Feed the opposition, appear at committee meetings, appear at parliamentary meetings, alliances with other groups. Some people go through the route of writing letters, letters to members of parliament. Some people go full-flung newspaper, backstory or front page talking about the issues. You're now beginning to go public. Then you now have the high profile. This is public criticisms, media advocacy, release of information, letter writing, protest action, to go to the street. We march, demonstrate, we shout solidarity forever. Even if I think protests have started losing its value for whatever reason it is, but these are still legitimate. That's high profile. You hit the street, you understand. Public criticism, you get, you would see, you'd see our beloved elder brother, Omoyele Sowore, he's on Arise TV, calling their names, he's using the media. You can see organizations, go on Twitter. You can see people go on Twitter, call out the president, call out the government, call out, and people that's now high profile. It's important for you to understand how to win. And sometimes you need to switch up these things. Sometimes you need to go from high profile to low profile. When you understand more of the context, sometimes there's some people, and if your advocacy is big enough, guys, there are some people you can do these three concurrently because you've been able to build the clout, right? So there are some people who have the political power, they have the political clout, they support your cause, right? But you won't find them on the street. So not everybody who you do not see on the street, is complacent. There are some people who are using soft power, what we call soft power. The problem we just have is trust. Remember, we spoke about accountability. Those of you who say you're using soft power, how do we know that you are not going to sabotage our interests? You're not going to tell them that leave them, when they're tired, they'll go back home. It can happen, because there's so much distrust within, the public sector. So we can have these three advocacy approaches going on concurrently. There are some who are going to be out there on the field. One is not more important than the other. Guys, I won't even lie. I won't pick any of the other. It's probably based on the situation we're engaging on. Your low profile is not, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best. It doesn't mean your medium profile is the best. It doesn't mean your high profile is the best. For me, for us to build an entire society, everybody must be able to play at the level where they're comfortable with. And so people like me come up with very strong opinions, and I say that take out the people you probably call social renegades, take them out of the polity, and you discover that the polity will fall down like a pack of cards, And so in the last general elections, when I said who I preferred candidate was, I didn't fail to put in, Omoyele Sowore. Why? We need somebody who is going to be in the media speaking truth to power, right? That is their own space. That is their own forte. I think it's disingenuous for us to want to force everybody to behave like us. It's wrong. It's wrong. So understand what your own power is and stick to it becomes very, very important. Let's move over to the next slide. Okay, I have just about 5 minutes to go so that we can open up for questions. Steps in a successful advocacy and policy influencing. Let's take this very quickly. One of the first things you need to do is to rank your decision makers, and this is a sample of a numbering system, so your decision makers are your stakeholders. It could be your primary targets, it could be your secondary targets. Remember, we said that. So the first, you can use the 1 to 5 ranking. So number one, you define the supporters of your advocacy. Who are the people that would easily support this thing? You classify them under number one. Your number twos are people who are your potential supporter of your demand. So maybe these ones, can join me. They are not with me today, but when they see that this thing I'm doing is great, they can join me. You classify them as number twos. The number threes are the people who are sitting on the fence, the people who are undecided. They don't know if they should go for PDP or APC. They don't know if they should go for Labour Party or NNPP. They're just on the fence. They can flip anyway. You understand? Identify them, right? Identify them. You can identify them by name. You can identify them as their office. You can identify them as whatever. Then your number fours are your likely opponents. This ones are, the guy doesn't just like my face. He looks like someone who is going to be my opponent. You understand? You classify those guys as your number fours. Your number fives are your definite opponent. You see those people, them. From the moment you started talking, they started looking at you in a very funny way. You know that this one is my opponent. You understand? The reason why you classify them is so that you come up with bespoke approaches to each of them, because you cannot engage these 5 categories of people, these 5 categories of decision makers in the same way. For your definite supporters, you don't need so much work, right? They already understand the problem. They support you. Your potential supporters will need little or more convincing. If you probably speak to them a little bit more. The fence sitters, the undecided people, are the people who will remain, who think they are neutral, but at the end of the day, they may shock you. So you need to know how to build up strategies to influence those people who are the fence sitters. For your likely opponents, one of the things you need to realize is the fact that whilst you need to flip all of these people to probably become your definite supporters, not all of them are going to support you. In fact, the people who are your likely opponents or your definite opponents may be doing you a great favor, because subconsciously they may be checking your intentions, number one. Number two, they may be checking your decisions. They may be checking your system, how you're going about this thing. So it's important for you to do that. Another thing you need to do, guys, is to familiarize yourself with the corridors of power by learning about the rules, processes, and the people that are most important to your issues. I cannot overemphasize this, right? Familiarize yourself with the corridors of power. Understand what problems are local government problems. Understand what problems are state government problems. Understand what problems are international problems or nationwide or sub-regional problems or sub-national problems. Excuse me, guys. You need to understand these things. Familiarize yourself with the corridors of power. Don't be talking about education and you're going to Ministry of Labor. What are you looking for? What concerns labor with education, for God's sakes, right? Understand, who are the people who call the shots in what you want to do. So research becomes very, very important. You need to learn the rules. There's a difference between when you speak to community and when you speak to the people who have political power, the people who have economic power. There are different ways to go about it. You have to be something to everybody. The way I would engage with a community, and I say this with the utmost sense of responsibility and respect, is different from the way I would engage with a political office holder, dependent on the situation. There are times when I am very firm on community because I need them to get to the point where I am in my understanding so that we can work together. Because if the community doesn't understand what we're talking about, they're not going to do anything about it, guys. It's just going to be a waste of emotion. Because for me, the biggest kind of advocacies are the advocacies that are driven by the people who are experiencing the challenges they are talking about, right? So it's very important. I don't joke with that, right? So understand the rules, understand the processes, understand the culture, understand, there are some people who the first day you meet the public office holder, you just want to fight. You know, Nigeria has traumatized you so much that you think shouting will fix the problem. Sometimes shouting won't fix the problem. You know, sometimes some advocate just goes about making enemies for themselves. It really doesn't make sense, right? You must be smart. You must be street smart. If you are not smart now, the more you do it, the smarter you get. You learn from experience also. And I mean, I cannot say I've not made mistakes. I've made a whole lot of mistakes. You know, I've spoken to some political office holders, and the way I spoke to them, I knew that my advocacy has ended with this one because there was nothing I was going to say, you know, that they were going to listen. You know, I was more, you know, I was more emotional than logical, you know, in my engagement. I mean, I was much more younger then. I just wanted things to change tomorrow, you know, but now I'm understanding that, or I've understood that, you know, things take a process. We can disagree without being disrespectful. I call out government a whole lot. I call out government a whole lot. You know, we can disagree without being. And guys, let me just be frank with you, right? The moment anybody decides to run for public office, right, the person owes you the responsibility of listening to you. Yeah, and that's what I sink into the heads of everybody I teach advocacy and policy influencing. I'm not saying you should become disrespectful, but there's some times when you need to hold your ground and call out, you know, people who, you know, think they are doing you a favor. You know, I've had opportunities to call out, you know, some people, you know, quite personally, and sometimes even in public, you know, on air, on the radio, on the TV, I've called out some people, right? You know, but that's not my first, that's not my go-to, that's not my default style, you know, but what I do what needs to be done. That's what I'm saying to you guys. And the next one is classify the players, knowing your allies, your opponents, and your targets. Remember, we spoke about secondary and primary targets. In all of your secondary targets, you have those people who are your allies, your opponents, and your targets. And still yet, in your primary targets, you have the same set of people. Remember the grading system. Number one, number two, who are your number ones, who are your number twos, who are your number threes, four, and five. You know, the next slide. Inform and build relationships. Advocacy requires a series of formal and informal one-on-one contacts with decision makers and a steady stream of clear, concise backup information. I am tired of seeing people say they're advocates without information. It annoys me. You know, I've listened to some people speak very beautiful English and make very dumb submissions. And I ask myself, what is the problem with these people? How are you guys able to move from, you know, common sense to this irrational logic you have, you know? So it's important for you to have clear sense. That's why I say research is important. If you don't have information about what we're talking about, just leave it. Don't go and mess things up for us. You know, just leave it. It's very important, guys. I cannot overemphasize this. I'm trying to wrap up. This is one of the most important things. If you've not gotten anything I've said today, this is one of the most important things, guys. Dimensions of advocacy. The first dimension of advocacy is for the beneficiaries and the marginalized. That is the first few definitions of advocacy we gave. This is where you are speaking for the people, the beneficiaries, the people who, you know, do not, you know, have the power, the clout to speak for themselves, you know, so you're practically coming in and you're speaking for them, you know. But if your advocacy stops at this level, then your advocacy is not sustainable. Your advocacy must be able to move to the level where you now begin to speak with the beneficiaries and the marginalized. And this is the point where you get to remember, guys, when we started, it was you going to the community and engaging the community. Excuse me. Right? Now you supported the community, you've built community resilience so much that community is able to begin to do what you're doing with you. So you want to go for an advocacy meeting, the community goes with you. You want to go on radio, community goes with you. It's very, very important. But the highest level for me that you get to, and I say, I give it to this guy, he's done his homework, he's done his great work, is when the beneficiaries and the marginalized people begin to advocate for themselves. This is at the point you get to and you can rest. This is when you minimize burnouts. This is where you minimize mental fatigues, that can come with you. So guys, don't ever forget this. The lowest level of advocacy is when it is just you speaking for the community or the beneficiaries or those people who are marginalized. The moment you move from that lowest level to the mid-level, which is when you're now doing it with, the community, becomes important. But the highest level, guys, is when these communities are able to do this for themselves. I have some tools for advocacy and the media, radio, newspaper, television, social media, is the new conversation. Fortunately, you don't have to pay for social media. Research is very important. Consistent research. The issues may change. The reason for the issues may change. So your ability to not just stick to the first research you did 5 years ago becomes very important. Mobilizing and campaigning, I've spoken about this. Your ability to mobilize people, mobilize citizens for action. Excuse me, guys. Information dissemination. This is you using creative design, using data representation, creating policy brief, just to push out your advocacy statement. Monitoring and evaluation is very important. The moment you set out for any campaign, the moment you set out for anything, any advocacy, you must begin to put measures to measure what you're doing so that you can look at your effectiveness and always go back to the drawing board. Litigation and lobbying. Litigation could be expensive in Nigeria because of a legal system and legal process, but litigation is also a very good tool to use as a campaign. Lobbying is also a very good tool. Lobbying comes in various ways. Lobbying involves, meeting with the people. Lobbying, there's a thin line between lobbying, because of the ethical considerations. If you lobby outside the ethical considerations, I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense. Then you have protests and rallies. Very, very important, guys. You could take a screenshot of these practical tips on advocacy, establish your agenda, your goals, listen well. An advocate is not just that person that talks. An advocate is that person who listens. In fact, one of the ways I would know that you're a great advocate is your ability to listen, because it's not just about making noise. It's not just about shouting. It's your ability to get feedback. What are people saying? It's very important. Be prepared, but don't feel that you need to be an expert. So you can start from wherever you are. The only time I discourage people from going into advocacy is when you cannot trust yourself or you are not trustworthy. The moment you're not trustworthy, I would tell you, I would beg you, don't get into an advocacy because you mess the system up, you mess the community up. When you want to go on an advocacy, recognize the accomplishments of the persons you're advocating to, no matter what, whether you like them or not. Unfortunately, these are part of the things you need to learn from the street. I can tell you uncountable stories of how I've been able to get immediate result by just acknowledging, an achievement. It could be that the person's child just got married. It could be that the person just became a granddad. It could be that the person, just completed a master's degree or a PhD. When I meet you, I'm trying to look for the easiest thing that I can connect with you. And the easiest way to connect with people is acknowledging the achievement, right? If I meet someone, and that's why research is important. I was doing an advocacy sometime. I've told this story in almost every class. I was doing an advocacy sometime, and I just heard that the woman I was going to meet, who was the PAMSEC permanent secretary, was going to be appointed as the head of service of that particular state, and it was a coded information. I just heard, and when I met with her, after exchanging pleasantries, I said to her, and awesome congratulations, for your soon to come elevation, to be the head of service of the state. And she was taken aback, she was shocked, but she felt good. And so, she felt like I was interested in, I wasn't just talking about the problem, I was interested in what was going on with her, you know, and I was celebrating her achievements. Guess what? That same woman took us from her office to the office of the secretary of the state government of that state, the SSG of that state, you know, and she was even there before we came there, you know, because we acknowledged her accomplishments. Lay out the problem, intended outcome, the consequence of your advocacy. If this does not happen, this is what is going to happen. Remember the story of your friend who is a local government chairman and you have out of school children in your community. Lay out the problem. We have high numbers of out of school children in our community. We need them to go back to school. There's a consequence if they do not go to school. They're going to become thugs and touts, you know, for other political office holders to use them, you know, to subvert the electoral process. Present your policy brief and be persuasive. For you to be persuasive, you must know what you're talking about. It's very important. Follow-up is important. Sometimes advocacy doesn't just, influencing or advocacy doesn't happen in one day. It takes a series of consistent engagement and follow-up. You know, remember you're there to build a relationship. Guys, this is what I mean when I say we may disagree, but we're not enemies. It's very important. This is supposed to be a practical session. I hope that you guys, one of these days, or we could be able to have a physical session where we can develop an activity, an advocacy activity, and you can test it around yourself. And if you guys can, you can take a screenshot of the screen and do it within your political parties. I think it's going to also help you to improve your knowledge, because the best way to learn is to practice knowledge, practice what you think you've heard, you know, so that you can identify the errors and you can become better at it. Guys, with these few points of mine, I hope I've been able to convince you and not confuse you that being an advocate is beautiful, but you need to learn the skill, you know, of advocacy for you to be able to do it effectively. Thanks so much. I would take questions. Jessica, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Busayo. We really, really appreciate you for your time, even with all that you're going through. We wish you speedy healing. And if you have questions, please, you can raise up your hand as usual, or you can write it in the chat and we will read it out. So questions, please raise your hand so that you will have an opportunity to ask. If you cannot talk, then you can write it in the chat and we'll read it out for our facilitator. Okay, since there are no questions, I'm not seeing any raised hands. And okay, there is a hand, Ibrahim Jari. Okay, you can unmute and ask your question, please.
Good evening, sir. You said on the differences between policy and law. You said the difference is that this one is covered by, this one is legal. You said this one is covered by. You said this one is. You say law is legally binding, while policy is not legally binding. But sometimes policy can become a law. If you take, for instance, this Kano State Tussle, this traditional institution Tussle, you know, initially it was a policy statement by the leader of the NNPP. I mean, the presidential candidate of the NNPP, and it was later become a law when it was taken to the State House of Assembly for deliberation, and later it was assented by the governor. So it has become a law. But still now it is being challenged in a court of law. So I want to know precisely the clear differences between law and policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, let me just answer this question. Thank you so much for this question. Now, for the balkanization of the Emirates Council, I mean in Kano, right? The then governor had to go to the parliament, sir, because the emir's office, was backed up by law. So for that law to be changed, for Sanusi to be taken out in the first iteration,
Yeah.
the governor was smart enough to go to parliament. Unfortunately, we know that governors control the State House of Assembly, which is not supposed to be so, because with the principles of separation of power, the executive is a government on its own, the legislative is a government on its own, same as the judiciary that actually checks each other, right? Now, before the emir was ousted or dethroned, he had to go back to, the State House Assembly. A new law was passed, and the governor appended his signature on that law. And so it became legal, to balkanize the Emirates Council into 5. A new sheriff is now in town. The new sheriff went back again to the State House of Assembly, which is the beautiful part of democracy. The State House of Assembly, reviewed the law to what it was before, passed the law. It went through the first reading, the second reading, the third reading, all between one day, and the governor appended his signature. Now, so what we have now is still backed up by law. Now, unfortunately, our politics is not matured yet to identify the clear stance of what the law should be, in terms of separation of powers. And so what, is playing out now is what I would define as the Nigerian backward, governance systems and process, where a court of competent jurisdiction today or 2 courts of competent jurisdiction can give 2 different rulings. And it's causing a big problem within the polity, right?
Thank you.
I know that, probably in the electoral college, you're probably going to have a session, if you've not had it, you're going to have a session on what I just spoke about in terms of the clear what's the word now? Distribution of powers, the level to which the executive can go, the level to which the judiciary can go, the level to which the legislative arm can go. Now, for me personally, I'm not a lawyer, but I do definitely know that if the current governor didn't repeal that act that was created that was appended by the former governor, he would have run foul of the law. So in that case, it's not a policy, sir. Now, there could be a policy statement that says we need to strengthen. Now, this is a policy statement. We need to strengthen the local institution of the Emirates. That is a policy statement.
Yes.
But if this current governor does not do that, nobody can take him to court to do that, because it's just a blueprint. It's at best a promise. He can decide to fulfill it or not. You won't hold him accountable. Do you understand? But the moment he went back to parliament, got the backing of the parliament, and he was able to sign that into law, and it was gazetted, it becomes an act of the state. So for you to repeal an act of the state, you have to go and do, much more than just going to court to have a stay of execution. It's more than that. Because in the idea of federalism, guys, the local government should have its autonomy as much as the state government having its autonomy. If Nigeria were to be a serious country, state laws should be respected. So I give you an example, right? And this may be a very sensitive example. If a group of people in a state decide by the members of their parliament to say that this is what we do not want in our state, and there is a law to back that up, if you want to, so for example, apologies if this is sensitive, overly sensitive to anyone. There are some cultures or traditions, or let's even say religions, that do not accept some things. And when I talk about something, so for example, when you go to the Southwest or the North Central, you know, people rear pork, they rear pigs, right, for consumption, right? They rear pork for consumption and they eat pork. But in some other states, you know, religion, you know, doesn't permit pork. Now, so what I mean is, if in state A, you know, there is a law, you know, that says we do not want pork here, you must respect that law. If you want to rear pork, you have to go to a state that doesn't care about, you know, or that doesn't have any gazetted law that speaks against that. Do we understand what I'm trying to say? I mean, yes. I'm trying to bring it down to the barest minimum. So states should be able to have that autonomy enough to determine how they want to live their lives and how they want to grow. For example, there's nothing stopping states in Nigeria to begin to compete within themselves. And when I talk about competing within themselves, what I mean is the moment state governments begins to rely on what they generate in their state, I believe all the states in Nigeria would work, because there are going to be more people going to the states that are working, whether we like it or not, right? If, for example, and I say this everywhere, sorry I'm taking so much time on this question, because it's important for us to understand the core of what federalism should be in the first place. If I am the governor of Ekiti State. Ekiti State is my mom's state. My mom is from Ekiti State. And as a matter of personal policy, I say that everybody in Ekiti State would have access to government-funded internet, you know, and I run fiber optics across everywhere. And I have a grid that provides electricity. And I built a place that is called, you know, Ekiti Internet City. Right? So within that place, internet is probably free. Power is always available, you know, and I build infrastructure there, you know. Now, what I would have done is that I would have attracted the best of the best tech talents to come into my state. You know the reason why? I have set a bar and say, people coming, if you are interested in Internet of Things, come into the state. You know, you have access to internet, you have access to power, you have access to soft loan and grants to build technology. Now, if the young people in Nigeria flood my state and I collect taxes from them for coming to my state because I created an enabling environment, my state is winning. And that's the kind of things that we want to see in states. If a state like Niger State is saying we're opening up to farmers, just come, we're going to give you a land, cultivate the land, you know, we'll provide you fertilizer, we'll provide you mechanized farming and all of those things. And farmers from everywhere begins to run to Niger State. There's something that is interesting them. It's the same way we talk about the Japa wave. There's what is called the push and pull factors. What is attracting people from Nigeria to come out to leave Nigeria? It is the notion that the economy out there, you know, is better than the one at home. The security out there is better than the one at home. And that's why people move, right? So in a nutshell, what I'm saying is, see, government policies, you know, are just blueprints. They are mere paperwork. If a government now takes its policy from just being a blueprint to becoming a law, that means it has gone through the process of legislation and a signature has been appended and it has been gazetted, then it becomes a law. If I come in today as the governor of Ekiti State and I say we have 100,000 out of school children, we are going to ensure that those children go back to their schools. That's a policy blueprint. If I don't achieve it, there's nothing you can do about it. But if I now go to the parliament and say, criminalize parents who have children who do not go to school, put a mandate on the government that the government must ensure that every child goes to school, and it goes through parliament and it becomes law. Now, if that doesn't happen, you can now take me to court as the governor, for not doing that. Unfortunately, our democracy is such in its infantile stage that governors have what is called immunity, right? So you can't take a governor to court,
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
And that's how, unfortunately, some governors, current governors are not giving past governors immunity also, like in the case of Kogi State, just to be lighter note, right?
Yes.
I see some questions in the chat box. Victor, let's take you then. I'll just respond to the questions in the chat box, guys, and we'll call it a wrap for today. I'm so exhausted, but we just have to do this. Victor, please, can you go ahead?
Good evening, sir. Thank you for the wonderful session. On the issue of, I don't know if you're hearing me.
Loud and clear.
Okay, sir. There are times that you've identified an issue and with interest and support of those you want to represent in terms of advocating for their interest now. And you've started working on it, and in the long run, it's like something has affected their support for you and they're trying to pull out. And you have already gone far with such an issue, but they are not trying to make it look as if you are doing it on your own. Is it okay to continue? Or what will you do in this case now? Given that you've already started something and you feel it's important to see it finished, but the people you are working with, the beneficiaries, don't see that and they're not really supporting you. And even the people in governance will now see as if you are an enemy of the government because you don't really have supporters again. Because in the end, it will look as if you are against the government when you don't have people that are really supporting you. What will you do in this case? Because I feel there are instances where you see you are supporting a group of people, but within a certain period of time, they will just start pulling out and you just find out that you are alone. So what will you do in this kind of situation?
My brother, one of the world famous philosophers, who happens to be from the Nigerian extraction, sang a song, and the song was "Lonely at the top, lonely, lonely, lonely." Quite sincerely, it's not a crime when you pull out from an advocacy. It's not a crime. I can say this. There are times when I've started some things and I stopped it. The reason is because I didn't think I was getting more support, right? See, you're not Jesus Christ who died for the sins of the world, right? We must understand that we're first of all humans. No matter how passionate I am about an issue, if the people who are the most affected, and this is me saying this in all sincerity, haven't gone through various process of carrying them along, and ensuring that they're part of the process, and I've done that in clean conscience. And they seem to, and it can happen in several ways, right? Now, money plays a very big issue, plays a big role in government fighting advocates, right? And it happens in the elections, right? I think that's the closest example I can give at this point. You've worked in the community for so long and you have told them, you know, don't collect bag of rice. Even if you collect the bag of rice, still vote your conscience. And the same people that you are telling all these things, election comes and they vote for the candidates who will give them bag of rice every 4 years. You know, what would you do? Would you kill yourself? No, you won't kill yourself. You move on. You know, but I know the pain there is the fact that you've done so much work and you've not seen the benefit of it. I understand that fact. But the truth of the matter is, there are times when you need to pull the plug. Sincerely, you need to pull the plug. I don't know how many of us know how to swim. I've almost lost my life in a stream when I was younger, you know, and so I got into the deep part. I didn't know how to swim, and the water was taking me in and out. And someone dived in and wanted to save me. And because I was struggling, you know, the person had come under to raise me, but I was struggling, you know, and I was pinning the person down. The person threw me off, right? Left me, you know, until I exhausted myself. Then it was easy for him to rescue me, right? Now, when you're trying to save a community, a group of people, and they don't want to be saved, my brother, go back to re-strategizing, you know, go back to re-strategizing, and that's where research comes in. The problem may be somebody somewhere who is a definite opponent is probably standing against you because of some pecuniary reasons. So when you notice those things, so that you don't burn yourself out and you don't throw your hands in the air like I did and say, I'm not even doing this thing again for anybody. You understand? Go back and re-strategize. If you need to take a break, take a break. You know, and this can happen on a case-to-case basis, depending on the issue you're advocating for. And I also see that, you know, at that point, you probably need someone you can also talk to, you know, and so if you probably have that kind of experience, anybody has that experience that you need someone to talk to, please feel free to hit me up. I would put my social media handles in the chat box, you know, for us to, you can be able to reach me out on any of this platform, because we cannot generalize. It has to be on a case-to-case basis, right? I hope I answered that question. Let me just respond to the questions we have on the chat box. Is it possible that there could be misplaced priorities or decisions? Yes, there could be misplaced priorities. Yes. Part of the reasons why you probably feel burnt out is probably because your priorities are misplaced. You know, and I say this every time. You know, sometimes you don't need money for advocacy. You know, unfortunately, because of the prevalence of not-for-profit organizations and the donors, we think every advocacy must require money. No, you don't need to host people in hotels. You know, you don't need to take community members to hotels to build your advocacy plan. No, you know, you can go to the community and work in the community. You know, sometimes you don't even need to travel. I created, I don't know how many of you know about Follow the Money. When I joined Follow the Money had about 4 states, you know, working in 4 states. When I got in, I moved it to the 36 states and 11 African countries. And how did I do that? I did that by realizing, first of all, that there was no need for us to spend so much money on travels, you know, when we can build the capacity of people living in those communities to take ownership of these campaigns, you know, to track government funds. And I rather divested the funds to investing in capacity building for those people who became advocates, you know, who were going to hold government, you know, to account that. And those guys individually in their state created networks across their local government. So Follow the Money has become the largest accountability movement in Africa, right? And it was just a simple strategy. So you can misplace your priorities when you're probably putting the cart before the horse. No, the horse should be first. What should I be doing? You know, what's my power base? How much do I have? You don't need all the money in this world to become an advocate, you know, but you can misplace your priorities. It's very, very possible. And a way not to misplace it is to understand what you want to do, what you want to achieve, and look for the cheapest possible means to achieve that. Also, with the state of insecurity in the country, you also don't want to be jumping about traveling unnecessarily, because the truth of the matter is, if you get kidnapped, it's going to be the burden of your family and you. So no matter how passionate you are, unfortunately, it's so sad that I have to say this. You have to look at within your abilities what you can do, to support local communities. Very, very important. Also, are there advocates that aren't fully informed in their? Yes, the advocates who have been on an advocacy and somebody was spewing, just pure rubbish. I didn't understand why he was saying that. He didn't understand the core of the issues. That's why research is very, very important. Another question, your examples focus on advocacy by individuals and community people, but sir, I'd like to know whether the same strategies can also be implemented in NGOs that were. Yes, absolutely. In fact, all my methodologies I shared with you, was gotten from my experience working in the not-for-profit space, and these strategies I shared with you is what we use to build the largest accountability movement in Africa, right? And the good thing is they are still blazing, We just got into the 13th country. I stopped at 11. My guys have taken it further. Follow the Money is in 13 African countries, and it's in every state in Nigeria, and it's in every local government in Nigeria. That's these strategies I just shared with you guys is what I worked on. Do we still have any other questions? Phil, I'll just take this as the last question, please. Very quickly, you can go ahead.
Phil.
Okay. So for this great insight and talking about policy, mine is very questionable.
Phil, you're breaking. I can hardly hear you.
Can you hear me
We
now?
can't hear you, Phil.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, yes, go.
So let me just be quick about it. So thanks for your insight and ability for you to be able to make it to us policies and law, because this president government from they've made so much policies and like you said, we can't hold them responsible for it. So please, I need you to or social media cases. I don't really know how to go about it. But this has actually given me an experience what I need to do.
Sir, were you able to make sense of his question?
No, Phil. I would have preferred if you could, probably type this out or, just reach out on any other medium. I've shared my social media handles, guys. Feel free to reach out, engage. If you have any questions, you can send me a DM. I'll definitely be there to answer. Thank you so much, Jessica and the team from Electoral College. It's been an amazing pleasure to do this again. Cheers. I wish you guys good success. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you so much, sir. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. Okay. So I'm going to ask everyone to unmute to appreciation. If you can hear me, you can unmute and express appreciation.
Okay, thank you very much thank you all for coming out for class this evening. And thank you, Jessica, for beautiful moderation. Remember, classes continue next weekend and your assignments will roll out by this week. So do well to check out all the information on the Telegram group and also your party groups. Thank you very much, everyone. And do have a lovely night rest.